Okay.
Okay. So we're just going to go around the room and we're going to, again, introduce ourselves, our name, and just name one way that we advocate. And would anyone like to start? Denise?
I'm Denise, and I advocate by recruiting and training volunteers to go out and be advocates.
Awesome. So I'm going to toss this to you.
Oh.
Sorry. And if you could just toss it to someone, so if you want to volunteer, you could raise your hand, or you could just toss it to someone randomly.
Oh. I'm sorry, you were looking at me, right? I thought she was looking at me.
I want to look at you.
Okay. My name is Carrie, and I advocate by always asking the clients if I can get them anything, even a drink of water, a snack, anything to meet their basic needs to make them feel comfortable.
Awesome.
My name is Roberta Stewart. I advocate by listening.
My name is Jasmine. I advocate, I go to college, so I try to advocate among my peers in class, especially the science classes.
Awesome.
My name is Minnie, and I advocate by spreading the word about SERV, about their services, and I connect the people I talk to with either the needs or whatever information that I have available to share.
My name is Amanda, and I advocate by volunteering.
Thank you. Great.
So,
I'm Christina. I advocate by placing the power in the victim's hands and just following their lead and asking them permission for what
Awesome.
makes them most comfortable.
Awesome.
My name is Melissa, and I advocate by empathizing.
My name is Jennifer, and I advocate by torturing my daughter and her teenage friends with all the information and dragging them along to save the night and issues like that.
Awesome.
my name is Stacey, and I advocate by volunteering my time to help others before I get sick.
Catch Jose.
My name's Jose, and I advocate by being informed.
Being informed. Awesome. And thank you.
My name's Amy, and I advocate by recruiting, training, and retaining all the volunteers.
Awesome. Oh, nice. Wow. That was surprising. My name is Lauren, and I advocate by educating and being an educator. So awesome. So thank you so much for, one, being here tonight, and two, just advocating in general. It takes a lot of work to advocate, a lot of time, so it's much appreciated. And so, we're going to talk a little bit about reproductive coercion, and we're going to talk a little bit about marital rape. But I want to kind of get an idea of what we already know about these two topics in the room. So, when you hear the words reproductive coercion, or you hear the term marital rape, what's the first thing that kind of pops into your head?
Forced sex.
Forced sex, okay.
Keeping your wife pregnant.
Keeping your wife pregnant, okay.
A lot of people think that if you're married, rape doesn't exist.
Okay, so it doesn't exist within the confines of a marriage?
Right.
Yeah. What are some other things that pop into your head?
Removing choice.
Removing choice. Mm-hmm. Anything else? So absolutely, all these things are absolutely correct. It's about forcing people to reproductive decisions that they don't want. There's kind of this idea that within a marriage, this rape doesn't exist. It's about controlling people's choice. And so the very powerful word and the most important thing that we need to remember when we talk about reproductive coercion and when we talk about marital rape is this concept of control. And we've all sat through either the DV training or the SV training, and you've heard this word control before. So could someone explain, in the context of abuse or in the context of violence, how does control play out? What does control mean in terms of violence and abuse?
Depriving.
And what do you mean? And is it Mimi or
Minnie.
Minnie? Can you explore? Can you explain a little bit more what you mean when you say depriving?
Depriving someone of having contact with their family or friends or financial, money. Yeah.
Yeah. So
depriving them of things they need.
sure. So depriving people of things they need, whether that's material things or just the need for other contact with other people. Sure. Where else do we see control when we talk about abuse and when we talk about violence?
Domestic violence.
Yeah, absolutely, domestic violence. And how does control kind of play out in terms of domestic violence?
I think it's just means of making that person feel smaller,
Okay.
manipulating them to a position where they feel like they can't escape their situation.
Absolutely. So using their power to make someone else feel smaller, making them feel like they can't escape, making them feel like they're kind of stuck where they are. Absolutely. Any other ways that we see control play out in abuse or in violence?
Denying equity in the relationship. So
Okay.
there's always a power imbalance.
Okay. So using that control to kind of create that power imbalance. So there isn't equity. Partners aren't equal. Absolutely.
I was going to say isolation,
Okay.
controlling who you hang out with or rather don't hang out with or talk to isolate and remove that support system a victim or client could have.
Sure. So actually controlling interactions, controlling almost the space where you can interact with other people. Absolutely. All these things are a part of reproductive coercion and marital rape. So just so we are all clear, reproductive coercion at its core is really about manipulation, sabotage, coercion, control, and force. And just so we're all kind of aware and on the same page with language, reproductive coercion is often called reproductive sabotage or coercive reproduction. They're all the same thing, but you might hear these other terms. So reproductive coercion is a form of intimate partner violence where one partner uses their power to control their other partner's reproductive choices. So can anyone think of examples in their lives, in friends' lives, in the media where you've seen reproductive coercion?
In any situation?
In any situation.
So I, a couple months ago, had to follow up on what we call an unusual occurrence report, which means something didn't go well in a situation work-wise, and it was from one of our domestic violence liaisons. And it had to do with a victim who was under case management with DCP&P and also had a DVL because there were children involved in the domestic violence situation. And so I took this information to the police department that was involved to try to have a conversation about what was going on, and I had some notes on a piece of paper about this victim who was 29 and had 7 children. And then I passed that paper as I was talking to this captain, and he said, "Do you have more information for me? Can I make a copy of anything?" I said, "I have some notes, but I'd rather you didn't copy it, but you can look at it if you want to take notes yourself." And when he looked at what I'd written down, age and how many children she had, he looked up and his comment was, and I don't think he meant to be insensitive, but his comment was, "She needs to get a new hobby." And so I used that as a teaching moment to talk about reproductive coercion, and he really had an aha moment, which I thought was pretty powerful because he's a captain, which means he can roll that new way of looking at a female who has many children who seem to be spaced close in age. And so instead of looking at it as somebody that, wow, who would want all those children, to focus it as another form of power and control in that person's life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great example of something that seemingly seems like, well, maybe this person's just being irresponsible, maybe this person's just kind of being reckless with their decisions and their sexual decisions, actually might be an indicator of reproductive coercion. So it was a great teaching moment to kind of highlight this concept that a lot of people aren't familiar with. Any other examples? Can we think of any examples in the media? TV, movies, songs, print media, of reproductive coercion?
Well, that's exactly my head. I'm thinking, no, it's a TV show.
So I guess that's a desired number of children, that big family.
Oh, 19 kids and counting.
19 kids and counting?
The
Okay.
Duggars.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, hearing Denise talk, it reminded me of on our human trafficking coalition, talking about how victims of trafficking will get pregnant by their pimps as a way to keep them under control and always have that connection there. And you know, another obstacle to breaking that connection with the pimp.
Okay. So the trafficked victim would become pregnant
by the pimp.
By the pimp. And so the pimp would impregnate them to control the victim, right?
Right?
Well, yeah, because once that child is born, then you have an even greater area of control.
Right. Right. Like using that child to persuade the victim to,
stay, to do things.
To do things that they don't want to do. If you don't sleep with all these people, I won't give your son food or shelter or clothes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another angle on what she's saying, and I'm not sure if it falls under this, but pimps forcing them to get abortions so they can keep them on the street. So they don't have to be off the street for the 9 months that it takes to carry the child. So if they accidentally get pregnant or they get pregnant, on purpose to get out of it, and then the pimp forces them to have the abortion, which goes against their reproductive choice to keep the baby.
That's absolutely an example, yeah. So reproductive coercion, as we pointed out, is when they use that power and control, but it doesn't always have to be to result in a pregnancy that's carried to term. It can also be to result in a pregnancy that's terminated without really their consent. Excellent. So reproductive coercion kind of exists in 3 forms, and I'm going to kind of walk around if you just want to. So reproductive coercion exists in 3 forms. Pregnancy pressure, birth control sabotage, and pregnancy coercion, okay? So pregnancy pressure will be the first one that we talk about. And these all are very similar, and they kind of all overlap with each other. And just because someone's being pressured into pregnancy doesn't mean that there isn't birth control sabotage there. They can exist in the same realm, but there are slight differences. And as advocates, I want us to kind of just be aware of what those differences are. So we're aware of it, and we are aware of it when we're out helping victims. So pregnancy pressure involves pressuring a partner into a pregnancy that they do not want. Okay, so it can be things like, say, hey, if you love me, you get pregnant, right? You love me. I thought we agreed on this, right? Or it could be things like, I'm gonna come over here and smoosh with you for a second. It'd be like things like, if you want to get married, we're having kids, we're having a baby, and if you don't do this, you really don't love me, right? So that's pregnancy pressure. It's the actual using kind of your power in your relationship, using that intimacy in the relationship to manipulate your partner into having a pregnancy or sometimes not having a pregnancy. Okay? Slightly different than pregnancy coercion. Pregnancy coercion is the difference is the use of force typically, or acts of violence or threats of violence to kind of enact the perpetrator's wishes over the other partner. So what that means is that the perpetrator, instead of kind of just pressuring them, now there's things like acting violently or threats of violence. So it could be things like, God damn it, you're going to have this abortion. Right? Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Right? But if we're in a relationship, and when I slam my hand down on that table, this is how I enact my power, and this is how something's going to happen, typically violence. That's pregnancy coercion. It's that threat of violence to actually push someone into a reproductive decision. In that instance, it was having an abortion, right? It can also be the threat of violence. And so one example that I like to use is if you have partners who are in a same gendered relationship, a threat can be something like saying that you're going to out your partner if they're not out to their families, right? So if you don't have a vasectomy, you know, I'm telling everyone that you're gay, or I'm telling everyone that you're bisexual, may not actually be an act of violence